All four of us are of a certain age-ish. So all of us remember CompuServe.
Yes.
If a website had an image, it took a half an hour on your 58K modem to download the single 1 kilobyte image.
What? 11%? I started downloading this thing like 2 days ago.
Is AI getting rid of your ceiling mics, classifying AV jobs, and the power of industry association? All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 678, recorded Friday, August 16th, 2024. The end of ceiling mics. This is AV Week, the weekly wrap-up of the biggest news and information we have gathered. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss that news and information, first and foremost, from parts unknown, places unknown, but oh my goodness, she's awesome. Her name is AV Dawn. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. Also with us is my buddy Brad Hensey from Crestron. Welcome, sir.
Hello, Tim.
And last but not least, a gentleman who stayed up late for us, at least late for him, Guy Campos from AV Magazine, all the way from the UK. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is actually 2 weeks in a row. I didn't plan it this way, but last week we had our buddy Justin Dawson from Ireland. This week, Guy Campos from the UK. In about a month or so, we're actually having somebody on from Singapore. For that one, I have to record at 8 o'clock in the morning my time. So not for this week, but just coming down the pipeline, we do have a young man coming to us from Singapore. So that'll be kind of cool too. First story comes to us from our friends over at AV Magazine. Extron has joined the NSCA. Extron Electronics has joined the NSCA, National Systems Contractors Association, and announced its partnership of the upcoming XBO Experience. Now, the XBO Experience is set for November 12th to the 13th at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. This is the first of this conference. Its aim is to equip the next generation, quote unquote, of systems integrator with cutting edge knowledge and networking opportunities. Extron's CMO, Chief Marketing Officer Casey Hall, emphasized the company's dedication to workforce development. Now, Extron is, of course, a sponsor of AV Magazine, of AVNation. They might be a sponsor of AV Magazine. I don't know. Dawn, how does manufacturers joining groups like NSCA, PSNI, AVIXA, any of them, how does that help AV users?
Well, I think it helps the same way having integrators and individual AV personnel join those groups. And that is, it gives us a means of quickly identifying who knows what they're doing, who doesn't know what they're doing, who at least tries to keep up on the trends. I mean, you can know perfectly well what you're doing, but if I don't know you and I'm trying to hire you, I need some way of measuring that. And if I'm on the East Coast of the US and you're on the West Coast of the US or somewhere in the Pacific Islands, I'm not going to be able to vet you as thoroughly as I'd want to. But if I see, okay, they're members of NSCA, they're members of AVIXA, they have this certification and that credential, that at least gives me a benchmark that, okay, they know enough to try. They know enough to pass a test, even if they've forgotten a bunch of it. You know, it just gives me that like little bit of reassurance that I'm not just dealing with, you know, Joe Trunk Slammer who's going to come in and do a piss poor job. So in that regard, I think it's very useful in screening as an end user. And that's one of the reasons when I was an integrator, I made sure the little mom and pops that I worked for that might otherwise have been viewed as Joe Trunk Slammer got these memberships, got these certifications so that we could stand up against the bigger guys competitively without having to, you know, do backflips through hoops to try to prove ourselves.
Brad, from your standpoint, you are the manufacturer on this group, and you guys, Crestron is, of course, members of several of these organizations. What does that do for you guys, both from a manufacturer and integrator relationship, but also a manufacturer and a AV user relationship?
Yeah, I think that, associations like this, efforts like this are always great ways to come together and show that, one, our industry is strong. Two, there are really big business opportunities. When you have manufacturers, integrators, and associations kind of coalescing, it's clear there is a real business opportunity here that people should take advantage of. Plus, when you come together in this way too, especially when you talk about workforce development, right? When there's a coalition between manufacturers and associations, it's easier to get in with universities and other schools as well, because then it doesn't feel like a sales ploy, and rather it's actual career development and those kinds of efforts. And so I think that these kinds of efforts can be hugely valuable for all of us, right? And I think it's an example of, a rising tide lifts all boats. When we all come together and really contribute to them, I think it's really great. We've been doing we've put a lot of effort into career and workforce development. We work with several schools and universities to help build some of these tracks. It's a career in AV is a viable and great career to get into. And so as many young people that we can introduce them to this path is really important. We have a really strong intern program. Those are some of the things that we do as a manufacturer, but then also pairing with some of the other associations is a good way to get more reach.
And actually, really speaking of universities and things that Crestron is doing, I'm going to hang out with some folks at Crestron at Pace University in November, where they're doing not what NSCA is doing, but they're bringing in a bunch of high school students into two of Pace's campuses, one in Pleasantville and one in Lower Manhattan. So that is kind of cool as well. Guy, same kind of question is when you're looking at things like this, and regardless of where that association is located, what does manufacturers and integrators coming together and helping the workforce develop, how does that help the end user here?
Well, it helps the end user if you have a thriving industry. And I think what's interesting about this is that you're seeing some innovation in events. If you look at what happened in the pandemic, there were no events. There was a lot of people face some interesting challenges about sourcing things, and it'll be interesting to see what happens now we're back to normal. And I think events like this are very interesting because they're bringing the up-and-coming people together, and that's good for the future of the industry, certainly.
Our next story actually comes to us from AV Magazine. David Danto, who of course hosts a show here on AVNation, he says the quote-unquote reign of ceiling microphones is coming to an end, much to the chagrin of an awful lot of microphone manufacturers. He is writing for Talking Points. The former HP Poly executive points to rapid advancements in AI and machine learning as the catalyst for this shift. These technologies have supercharged sound cleaning capabilities, which allows for even basic hardware to develop quote-unquote crystal clear audio, and the result is a return to simpler, more cost-effective solutions like desk mics or strategically placed standalone units. Danto says this AI-driven audio revolution promises not just cost savings, but a dramatically simplified approach to outfitting meeting spaces. Mr. Hensey, Crestron is no stranger to AI, so the simple question here is where else do we see AI impacting, or whether it's UC, conferencing spaces, or other spots in the AV industry?
I think that, you and I, Tim, were having a conversation earlier this week, and I think that the AI revolution is certainly upon us, but it is so early, and it will be built through constant iteration and innovation, and I like to correlate it to the internet, and where we are today with the way we rely on the internet is vastly different than the CompuServe era, where it was all promise and people could see early glimmers of goodness coming through. And we're in that CompuServe era. I think that this is a really good example of technology building upon the successes of technology that came before it. In many ways, it's standing on the shoulders of giants. This stack of audio technologies to improve the audio performance will get applied to many different types of microphones and devices. And then it will become more ubiquitous. It will just help everybody to be able to deploy this technology more simpler, more cost effective, and in more sophisticated ways. And that just means that more spaces will be connected, we'll have more audio, but this will be applied in the same way to control interfaces, to video, to content distribution, also to the way you manage and monitor your whole estate and all of the technology in that space. And so I think it is really exciting. The other thing I was thinking about in this regard, particularly around taking individual technology and advancements and then applying it in new ways. I remember 15 years ago, I was at this startup event and there was this little software company and they had one piece of technology and they could scan your whole photo library and they could pick out the faces. And so then you could say, I want to see the face of this family member. And it was this one company, that's all they did. But now, today, 15 years later, that technology specifically is deeply embedded into your iPhone, into your mobile phones. It is just ubiquitous, and it's just a table stakes. And so I think that it is just, we'll see these advancements building on top of each other. And I think it's a great thing for end customers, but for us as manufacturers and as an industry, it also raises the expectations for among our end users of what they want delivered. And that is an opportunity for us to continue to raise that bar and innovate around it.
Brad, I'm gonna pick on you for a second. Not really, but I'm gonna pick on you for a second. All four of us are of a certain age-ish.
Yes.
So all of us remember CompuServe.
Yes.
And for those of you that are under a certain age, here is briefly what the CompuServe era was. Nothing but text. If a website had an image, it took a half an hour on your 58K modem to download the single 1 kilobyte image. Okay. So, Brad, how do we get from CompuServe, which again is mostly text, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to say jump to full bandwidth and 1 gig download and full video.
Yep.
The interim for me then would be AOL.
Oh, yeah, sure,
right?
Totally.
So how do we get to the AI version of AOL?
Well, I think that, it is going to take us changing the way that we think about technology and apply technology, right? Because even back then, it was all about, I'm going to dial into a server and maybe I can send a message back and forth, right? But if you look at the way that the internet has shifted the way we do business, the fundamental ways that we connect, as humans, but also machine to machine, right? All kinds of things. Nobody in the CompuServe era predicted all of that. But what you did is you just went out and you applied it, and then you built on top of it and you iterated. And I think that that's the way that we get to that same spot, is apply technology where it makes sense, talk about it, and go and see what works really well. But more importantly, try and drive a mindset shift about how these new approaches can really change the way you think about and live with technology. And I think that is really crucial for all of us in order to get there, is just keep building, right? And keep iterating on top of it.
All right, guys, same kind of question here is, where else do we see the AV industry iterating, to use Brad's terminology? Where do we see them iterating and to kind of get us to that next level, that next stage of AI in AV?
Well, the obvious other area is intelligent cameras. So, this article was very provocative in talking about audio, but a lot of the same issues come up in video. So you have the question of whether the cloud versions, say Cloud IntelliFrame in Teams or Teams rooms, how good will that be compared to Edge IntelliFrame or multi-stream IntelliFrame? You have the same issue in Zoom as well. And in a lot of those cases, the cloud versions aren't necessarily designed to be as good as the Edge versions. They're just there as an option for existing things that you have in the room, and maybe for cheaper, smaller rooms, that kind of thing. And there's just so much to say about this little provocative article on the audio side, because it has a great title, The End of Ceiling Microphones, but we are not going to see the end of ceiling microphones. They're still going to be there for the big, important spaces. What you're going to see is a lot of small and medium-sized rooms, which will have a lot of these tabletop devices. And so it won't be the same projects, it won't be the same integrators switching from ceiling microphone systems to the smaller versions. It will be different projects, bigger rollouts. And, a lot of the stuff around ceiling microphones, a lot of the issues there are why they came in were like psychological and practical barriers to tabletop devices, gooseneck microphones and lapels and so forth. And if you look at that, things like that go missing, they're fiddly, people don't like them. So people loved what are described as complex, expensive ceiling microphone systems that you have to liaise with other people about for those reasons. And it'll be interesting to see whether these tabletop devices overcome those same kind of psychological and practical barriers. And I think maybe they will, but in the smaller and medium-sized spaces. And when you look at, is AI going to be great for the smaller tabletop device? If anything, AI is great for the device that's further away from you. So the ceiling microphone there's a further distance from the speaker. So surely the sound cleaning algorithms there are going to perform wonders for that, maybe more so than for a device that's closer to you, where there's maybe less need for that. So I think the article itself was really, really provocative. And I think there are going to be shifts in the way the industry works. And it's going to be more a case of when you video enable all these multiple rooms around the place, it's quite likely that AI will help produce good enough audio with these smaller devices. But it's not the end of ceiling microphones by any means.
It is a great headline to get people really into it because it really pushes them to think about it. But I think at the end of the day, the winner here is the end user because they have the flexibility and the choice now, right? As you said, Guy, sometimes a ceiling microphone is the right application. It is the right form factor to deploy a microphone in a room. If it's a multi-purpose space that changes all the time, all the psychological reasons. But then in some of those other factors, a microphone, a gooseneck microphone is more appropriate. But I think the point of the article and the point of these advancements is you can get the same high performance, the same great quality audio in a variety of form factors. And now you can stay focused on what happens in the space. What is the form factor that will ensure that there's the best experience for the people using that space?
Dawn, you're actually an user. So are we getting seriously? I don't know if I can poke on at Danto, but I'm going to. He can text me and yell at me later. But Brad's right. And Guy both. You know, it's an enticing title. But are we getting rid of ceiling mics?
That depends on whether they're willing and able to incorporate that AI to improve their experience. I'm going to disagree with my good friend from the UK there, Guy. I see some of the problems, the biggest problems with the ceiling mics not being in the smaller and medium-sized rooms, but in those very large, flexible, reconfigurable rooms that is their bread and butter, but they also are such large, reconfigurable, usable, full of people rooms that they need sound reinforcement. And if you have ever tried to do sound reinforcement in a room with ceiling speakers, ceiling mics, trying to make things without a horrible echo and have sound on the far end, and I mean, it's just a nightmare. I could give you names and cases, I'd be fired and court-martialed or whatever, but I could list the times that it's been a major pain in my tuchus. Now with AI, we've got companies coming out that instead of ceiling speakers, they use AI to do wall speakers that can act like ceiling speakers and pick up everybody in the room. I'm not saying what company. Some of the ceiling mics are starting to incorporate the AI so that they can better filter out that speaker conflict. And until we get all of that fully functional and allow us to do both sound reinforcement and far side audio in these spaces that are very large, very configurable, you know, we don't know from day to day, is it going to be an auditorium setup full of people? Is it going to be a giant horseshoe for a meeting with who knows what important people on the other end and a few people loitering around the sides? Is it just going to be a conference table in the middle? We don't know. And so we can't always bank on a tabletop mic, a gooseneck mic, a handheld. And then, of course, the one room we've had the most problems with, it was built during COVID. So the old pass the mic in the auditorium setup for questions is not a thing. And even walking up to the mic for questions is not a thing. How do you address that? So there's a lot of ways on the audio front that incorporating AI fully and more advanced will definitely improve the user experience. And I cannot wait for you all to come out with it. So hurry up, audio people. Let's make this happen.
I think that the other way that this is beneficial for all of us too is it will create an arms race among the audio providers, because if this AI technology, this AI stack makes some of these features table stakes, then the other manufacturers to continue to compete will have to innovate on top of that. And I think that at the end, it'll keep pushing us as an industry to deliver even better solutions. And so I think it's a challenge certainly for manufacturers, but at the end of the day, it's a good way for us to show real value too.
All righty. Last story here. CEDIA is once again heading up to Capitol Hill here in the States. They are spearheading an effort to establish quote unquote technology integrator as a distinct classification within the U.S. standard occupational classification system. The association argues that integrators currently lumped in with electricians possess a unique skill set that deserves recognition as the government gears up to revise the 2018 SOC for 2028. CEDIA is rallying industry support and lobbying Congress to advocate for this change. The push follows CEDIA's recent quote-unquote smart home day on Capitol Hill and represents a broader strategy to elevate the status of integrators in the eyes of policymakers. Now, when the smart home day on Capitol Hill came out, they did mention this. I did reach out to AVWeek, and I'll talk about that in a second. They say they support this effort. They support the revision of the SOC for 2028. One thing that AVWeek does not do, and this is where I'll contrast, I have had a long conversation with AVWeek and with Mr. Labuscus, CEO of AVWeek, about AVWeek's lack of lobbying efforts over the last 10 to 12 years. Back in the 90s, back in the 2000s, when it was called Infocom, they had an actual governmental office. They did actual lobbying efforts. That seems to have fallen off the last decade or so. Again, AVWeek says they support this and they are in contact with policymakers, but it does not appear to the effort and to the level that CEDIA is doing it. Guy, I know that this has no impact on the UK market in any way, shape, or form, but I'm going to ask you to make an equivalency here between the UK or the EU market. Where else can just organizations and industry associations globally, where else can we look to highlight and bring kind of a spotlight and a separation between AV integrators and technologists versus electricians?
Well, look, this is a great initiative. Fantastic that they're doing it. Very much to be applauded as part of the wider scheme of getting legislators and the public to know more about AV and to recognize it. I actually take a contrarian view about lobbying. So one of the great joys of writing an editing copy about AV is that it's free of the constant stories about regulation you get in other fields. So there is one area in Europe which is quite interesting, which is the regulation in the European Union around sustainability. We know that sustainability is becoming more important, particularly in digital signage tenders, and maybe there's lobbying to be done there by an association as well as the manufacturers. But AV is not like tobacco, which I've written about, or alcohol. When used as intended, there are no adverse health effects. When it's banned, you get mafia gangs in dealing with prohibition. So the wonder of AV is that you're transforming the workplace. You're making free time more exciting without a lot of the regulatory issues you get in other industries. Sure, there's like health and safety and employment law, but that applies across the board. So I think associations can have an interesting role to play in promoting the industry as a whole. Great projects. So one that was very popular for us this week was, what's supposed to be the world's largest outdoor LED wall, subject to certain qualifications. You have the Sphere, etc., which is the largest LED wall. Now, when we wrote about that, there's fantastic interest. The public are really engaged. When there was a drone pilot who did some footage that got 20 million views on Instagram before the event organizer had him take it down, that I think is really, really valuable. And yes, lobbying can be valuable, but apart from the issue of energy consumption and sustainability, it's really great that AV products are not subject to a lot of regulation, in my view.
Don, from a user standpoint, maybe in user, how could job classifications like this help whether that is in OSHA's protections, whether not that you're not protected by OSHA, but different classifications, different sort of protections, labor organization help. How could something like this help the folks that are on the front line of AV?
Well, I got to tell you, it's vital. And not just because I happen to work for an end user in the government sector, but it's a case of, and Guy said it, we're a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry, and so many people don't even know we're a thing. We just don't exist in their minds. What do you mean you work in commercial AV? What is that? I don't get it. Until we get over that, they're not going to understand us. And so we get lumped in with electricians until about 5-10 years ago in the master spec, which is your construction documentation for any new building project. There was no AV section. It was, okay, look under partitions where you put your toilet walls, and you might find something about screens or whiteboards there. Go into this other section where they're talking about running, major power things through the building, and you might find something about some conduit that is used for AV. Like, we were just all over the place. And when I was an integrator in that field, trying to find us even to know if we could bid on something was a nightmare. They came out with the master spec. I think it was 24, not this year, but it was like 10 years ago. AV had its own spot. We still only had to look a couple other places plus the AV section to find if it was a worthy bid. In the sector I'm in now, we have to prove constantly, are we hiring people that fit in this job classification? Is this job classification match their job classification so we can hire them? Our purchasing people want us to buy for people that are registered with this particular health and safety vetting organization. Well, they only vet you if you have a job code that they cover. I think in the entire database of several 100,000 bidders, we found maybe a dozen AV integrators in the entire database. Wow. Because the small ones don't know it exists and that they have to be part of it. There isn't really a clear classification for us. And we're not allowed to hire if they're not in there, but they're not in there because there's no space for us. So how do you get through these conundrums? And if I were still an integrator in the DC area where I am, I would desperately want this to happen. As an end user in that sector, in this area where I live, I absolutely want this to happen. And if AVIXA, CEDIA, NSCA, any of our bodies can help lobby and come together and have a voice, the way we tried to come together and have a voice with the whole white space and microphone frequency thing, come together, work together, we might be able to make a difference. So I'm all in favor of this. It can only make my life easier, which is what it's really about, right?
100%.
And I think it's great for the whole industry.
All right, NC, you'll have the last word on this. Where else do we need to look to highlight and lift up the profile of the AV industry?
I think this is certainly a worthy effort. And I think ultimately, one of the things I hope happens out of this is that it becomes, or we drive more awareness about this industry, and we inspire a lot of people that are smart business people that can see this is an opportunity for them to come in and build a business, and that they are attracted to this industry, because I think that's one of the things we constantly need is new blood to come in and see that there are so many opportunities. I think especially in the residential space, in the commercial space, there's tremendous opportunity. And so, especially for CEDIA, somebody that wants to build a business, is business minded, they can come in and they can build a really great business going and deploying smart homes for people in any market. And so if we can attract these smart people that want to come and build a business, I think it will be good for all of us, because ultimately the smart home penetration within that market is far lower than it should be. And what it will take to help get deeper into that is more people that want to help drive this type of integration on the residential side, and on the commercial side as well. And so I hope that this ultimately will lead to that side of that kind of a benefit for all of us. But you do need some of these foundational elements, I think, that can help enable that as well.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Don, thank you much. I'm not going to ask where you work because then I'll get shot, but how can people connect with you if they are so inclined?
I am on LinkedIn and several places throughout the internet. Dawn Meade, Meade, just like the fort and the general. You can also find me all over the socials at AVDawn. And if I can ever get back to work and get back to traveling with work, you will find me hopefully at Infocom and other such shows. So hope to see you somewhere.
I hope so. We'll have to get you back on stage and get you teaching again. So, Mr. Brad Hensey, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or Crestron?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm posting there a lot. And then also Crestron on all of the socials and crestron.com. Also, we have a booth at CEDIA, which is coming up in just a few weeks, booth number 1901 in Denver. Sadly, I won't be there because I'll be going to Infocom India, where we also have a booth there. And so a lot going on.
Super, super jealous about that. I will, one of these days, I will make it to Infocom India. So check out. You can go see Brad in person if you are in Mumbai.
That's right. Come say hello.
Mr. Campos, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or AV Magazine?
So I'm on LinkedIn. We have a website, avinteractive.com. You can subscribe to our print magazine, even if you're in North America. So AV Interactive.
Wait, whoa, back up. What?
North American subscribers very welcome. Likewise, we have
Seriously?
Absolutely.
I did not know this.
And we have the AV Awards scheme. We just published the shortlist this week. A lot of the judging for that is now done online and international. So, you know, an end user or a consultant who's independent, free of conflicts of interest and objective, would also be welcome to get involved with that scheme. So, well, Dawn, we'll speak later, hopefully. So thank you for inviting me.
I learned something. It's like I haven't subscribed because I just figured you guys would ignore the subscription. I am going to go subscribe to that now. I really did not realize I could get a physical copy of AV Magazine. That's really cool. So
long as our financial director agrees. Currently, the case is yes. So
you said yes. If they say no, I'm going to call David and I'll yell at him.
Long may that continue.
I'll call David Allen. I'll yell at him. All right. For Tim Albright, don't follow me anywhere. I'm not very interesting, but go by the website if you would please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. A brand spanking new State of Control landed today. Now that Mitchell is off vacation, it was published this morning, so you can go check that out. Brad mentioned CEDIA. We are going to Denver, so you can check that out the 5th through the 7th of September. And by the time this posts, you can also check out the previews that will start posting as well, so you can get a sense of what folks are bringing, including the folks at Crestron. So all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, as all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.